Dopamine detox is not a real detox. You're not flushing dopamine out of your brain. You're not resetting your reward system, and if dopamine actually disappeared, you would not become calmer and more focused. You would have a serious medical problem. That is the first twist. The second is even better. The internet took a useful self-control idea, dipped it in fake neuroscience, and sold it back to people as enlightenment. And that is why dopamine detox sounds smart, feels true, and still gets the science badly wrong. Dopamine is a normal neurotransmitter involved in movement, motivation, and reinforcement of rewarding behaviour. And mainstream medical explainers say a literal dopamine detox is not actually possible. The myth goes like this. Modern life blasts your brain with dopamine. Your reward system gets fried. Normal life starts feeling boring. So you cut out stimulation for a day, or a weekend, or a week, and your brain somehow resets. No phone, no junk food, no scrolling, maybe no music, maybe no talking. Maybe, if the internet has fully escaped the paddock, no eye contact with another human being. And once you have suffered heroically in aesthetic silence, you come back healed. That is the story. The problem is that almost every important part of that story is either oversimplified or just wrong. Harvard Health says the original dopamine fasting concept was widely misunderstood, and the label had very little to do with either actual fasting or literally lowering dopamine. This myth survives because it attaches itself to a real feeling. A lot of people do feel overstimulated. They do feel more distractible. They do feel less able to sit with boredom, focus deeply, or do boring but important work without reaching for the nearest glowing rectangle. And when they step away from constant pings, feeds, and novelty for a while, they often do feel better. So the brain does what brains do. It notices the improvement and grabs the first explanation that sounds scientific. I reduced my dopamine. I reset my receptors. I cleaned out my reward system. But that is where the story jumps the tracks. The improvement may be real, the explanation usually is not. Cleveland Clinic's explanation makes this exact distinction. People can benefit from changing habits, but not because they are literally detoxing from dopamine. This is the part the internet quietly leaves in the basement. Harvard Health explains that the idea, popularised as dopamine fasting by psychiatrist Cameron Separ, was not meant as a literal dopamine reset. It was much closer to a behaviour management strategy. Reduce impulsive engagement, interrupt unhealthy habits, stop obeying every cue the second it appears. That is not ridiculous at all. In fact, that part is sensible. But practice more deliberate behavioural control is a terrible slogan. It sounds like homework. Detox your dopamine sounds like forbidden neuroscience. So the catchy phrase survived. The nuance got thrown under the bus. Dopamine is not a little goblin of pleasure sloshing around your skull demanding more crisps and more reels. It is part of a much bigger system. NIDA explains that dopamine is central to reinforcement, helping the brain learn which actions are worth repeating. Its educational material also describes dopamine as being involved in movement, motivation, and reinforcing rewarding behaviours. That matters because it changes the whole picture. Dopamine is not just about feeling good. It is deeply tied to learning, attention, motivation, and repeating behaviours that seem important or rewarding. So when someone says, "I'm addicted to dopamine," what they usually mean is something more like this. I'm trapped in a loop. Cue, craving, response, reward, repeat. That is a real problem. It is just not the same thing as having too much dopamine in the cartoon way the internet talks about. NIDA's addiction science materials specifically describe dopamine as central to repeating rewarding activities and reinforcement, not simply as direct pleasure itself. Once you stop treating dopamine like a magic pleasure mist, modern tech starts making much more sense. Your phone does not need to hypnotize you, it just needs to train you. Buzz, check, tiny reward. Buzz, check, nothing. Buzz, check, maybe this one matters. That uncertainty is powerful. It keeps the loop alive. Not because dopamine is evil, because your brain is built to learn from cues, reinforcement, and expectation. This is why so much of modern digital life feels sticky. It is not supernatural. It is well-engineered repetition with a very convenient delivery system in your pocket. NIDA's materials describe how dopamine surges in reward circuits reinforce behaviour and help drive repetition, which is why cue-linked intermittent rewards can be so compelling. Now for the twist that keeps this from becoming a lazy dunk. People are not always imagining the benefits. A 2025 randomised trial in PNAS Nexus found that blocking mobile internet on smartphones for 2 weeks improved sustained attention, mental health, and subjective well-being. The study reported that 91% of participants improved on at least one of those outcomes, and some of the gains were partly explained by spending more time socialising in person, exercising, and being in nature. That is a big clue. The useful effect was not dopamine left the building. The useful effect was that the environment changed. Fewer cues, fewer compulsive checks, less frictionless novelty. More room for attention to settle down. So yes, stepping back from the slot machine in your pocket can help. But that is a behavioural reset, not a chemical cleanse. That interpretation follows from the trial design and from the mainstream medical explanations that frame the useful core of the trend as changing habits and triggers rather than literally fasting from dopamine. The internet is brilliant at taking a real problem and attaching the wrong explanation to it. Real problem, constant stimulation can wreck your focus. Wrong explanation, you have too much dopamine. Real problem, you keep getting trapped in cue-reward loops. Wrong explanation, your brain needs to be chemically purified. Real problem, reducing compulsive digital habits can help a lot. Wrong explanation, you reset your neurotransmitters by suffering dramatically for 24 hours. And that is why so much wellness content turns into theatre. Because theatre sells. A ritual is more exciting than a system. A detox is more glamorous than a change your environment. A villain is more clickable than caveats. But a dramatic explanation is not the same thing as a correct one. Harvard Health explicitly warned that misunderstanding the science around dopamine fasting can create maladaptive behaviour. And Cleveland Clinic similarly says the trend is misnamed and not a literal dopamine reset. So what is the better model? Not detox, design. You do not need less dopamine. You need fewer traps. Make the bad loop harder to enter. Move the distracting apps off the home screen. Log out after using them. Turn autoplay off. Leave the phone in another room when you need to think. Block mobile internet during work blocks. Make compulsive behaviour slower, uglier, and more annoying. Then do the opposite for the things you actually want to do. Open the document before you start. Put the book where you can see it. Lay out the trainers. Protect stretches of uninterrupted attention before the day gets harvested by nonsense. That is not mystical. It is not sexy, but it is a lot closer to reality. And reality usually beats wellness fan fiction in the long run. Harvard Health and Cleveland Clinic both frame the useful core here as behaviour change, trigger management, and tolerating discomfort rather than any literal dopamine fast. So is dopamine detox real? As a literal detox? No, busted. As a sloppy internet name for reducing compulsive behaviours and stepping back from constant stimulation? Sometimes, and that part can genuinely help. So the myth gets the chemistry wrong, but it accidentally points at something real. A lot of people are not broken because they have too much dopamine. They are exhausted because too many systems are designed to train their attention into fragments. You do not need to purge your brain chemicals. You need a little more control over what gets to rehearse itself in your brain all day. And that is a much less magical answer. It is also the one that survives contact with evidence.